negotiate the peace of Versailles in the spring of 1919. The irony being, we will not sign off on that treaty. Remember, all American treaties have to be ratified by whom? The U.S. Senate. They're not going to do it. It's dominated by conservative Republicans and even conservative Democrats, by the way. You get a titanic struggle between Wilson and the Republican leader at the time, Henry Cabot Lodge. You get cartoons like these that will show we're not going to sign off on this treaty. Again, the irony of establishing the League of Nations, that we're not going to be a member of it. It was never effective in as an institution at any time, anywhere. And not because we weren't members, it just was a badly flawed institution. Train leaving without us. I like this one here, Cabot Lodge. Isn't it clever? There's the peace treaty hanging on the wall. So there you go. Look, this is indicative of where we're headed after the war. We are shifting politically to a more conservative America, not just a more conservative Congress, a conservative America. The 20s is a bipolar decade in some respects. There's a lot of change, social change, and what we might call liberal change taking place, especially on a social level. But there's also a lot of conservatism at the same time. Maybe it's us. Maybe it's our own time too. I don't know. Hard to say. These things are always hard to compare. Wilson, as for Wilson, again, he will struggle with all of this, faces stroke, fall in 1919, never recovers from it. If you look at the last page of the chapter we're just getting started into, I think that's where it is. No, it's not. 400, last of the chapter from Wednesday. You'll see what happens with Wilson. Wilson never fully recovered from his strokes. He will go into retirement in 1921. He'll stay in Washington, D.C. She died there in 1924. Doesn't live too many years after his presidency. Again, never completely functional. Actually died of stomach issues more directly, but just never got back on track. He could speak better in his last few years. He actually got on the radio and gave a few addresses, so that much at least got better. He went to Warren G. Harding's funeral in 1923. Didn't get out of the car. He just didn't have the strength. So he watches the funeral at the cemetery from his car. So his car being driven for him. So his story ends kind of in the range. His second wife, by the way, will live until the 1960s. She will actually meet John Kennedy when he was president. So. All right, let's start in chapter 5 here and see how much ground we've got. I need to cover all of this chapter before we finish it. There's a lot of different stuff. Again, this is snapshot kinds of things from the 20s. We can't begin to cover we can't cover a decade in an hour and a half. There's just a lot of things going on that we're just not going to be able to cover ground on. Yeah.
Just to diverse, just back just a second on the League of Nations. Do you think it would have made any big difference if the United States had been in the League of Nations?
Not ultimately. The lack of membership of the United Nations, he's asking, would it matter if the League of Nations if we had joined it? Ultimately, no. It's an institution, it's a flawed institution. It's not going to be able to do the kinds of things that Wilson anticipated. It's not going to make us avoid World War II. And I think the thing about us not being in the League of Nations is more, what's our role going to be in the post-World War I world? Not going to be leadership. This is an opportunity here where we want to take the mantle of leadership of the Western world, like we have today, like we do today. We're going to reject it. We're not going to do it. It's too soon. We're just not the mindset for it. So our hegemony or our leadership in the 20th century could have started 30 years earlier, but he didn't. He said, nope, you're not part of the war. We helped you win. Thanks, we guess, for Axton. We're going back home. Don't call us. We'll call you. See you later, or not. And because we don't want. Look, part of this is we don't want to get sucked up into the next conflict. We're in the League of Nations, and you run the risk of being pulled in whatever happens next. So we're going to reject that in spades, to say the least. Does that answer your question, John? Yeah, I just don't think it's going to ultimately matter. But it is just one more nail in the coffin of the League of Nations ultimately. Look, we're not in it. The Germans are in it for a little while, then Hitler gets them out pretty quickly. The Russians are in for a bit, then they drop out later. You just have some of these big nations that aren't part of this process. So it's just not going to be an effective institution. Okay, let's look at this conservative move here. First, we have to wrap up the war. If we're not going to sign off on the Versailles Treaty, then the war technically continues for us, technically, because we haven't treated out yet. So we've got 114,000 Americans killed, and no actual end of the war as far as politically. So we have to actually negotiate separate treaties with all the nations we went to war with after the war. Which we will not finish up until the early 20s. So we do separate stuff from Versailles. Versailles ends it for everybody else. For us, we've got to go knocking on doors and say, you want to end the war? Yeah, that's good. Seems like the right thing to do. And you can see some of the details on that here. Next section here on 401 is about the flu, which you mentioned multiple times. The flu, it's almost like when you say the flu, we're kind of, the flu, we all take our shots. We can skip it. Here you're talking about an extremely virulent form of the flu. If I say H1N1, does that register with anybody? The past few years we've heard that viral form, H1N1. This is a form of H1N1. It's a strong form of H1N1. So this virus, and I'm not a doctor, so I might be saying this wrong, but this virus has been around for a while. This form, to an extent, that we've faced today, has been around before. But here, it's where it mutates into something absolutely, it's just a killer. Yes, the flu can kill. We all know that. This takes and takes and takes. And one thing, too, it seems that, and this is hard to understand. The flu today, usually your more susceptible victims are who? Older folks, us, us, and then younger children. This seemed to really concentrate on young adults. Now, why? Well, good question. Is that because, on one level, because you have concentrations of young men at the front together, and so is that why? Well, I'm not the doctor, I don't know. But it is huge, and it is worldwide. It's everywhere. This will kill twice as many people as World War I killed. If we're talking about 11 million people killed in World War I, this kills at least 22. That's what I put on the page. Now, some historians will put that number at 50 million. Some put it up to 100 million. Well, that's too high. And I'm not in a position to argue about 50, but if it's 50 million people, that's 3% of the entire world's population. If we face 3%, a disease that killed 3% of the world's population today in a 2-3 year period, math is, they said, where 3% of 7 billion is?
210.
210. That's, why am I up here? 210 million. We wouldn't leave our house. I wouldn't. Gosh, 210 million people worldwide would be crazy. But anyway, so this is a big deal. Look, it's everywhere. It's up in the Arctic. It's out in the islands in the Pacific. And there's just no place to hide on this one. Somebody mentioned the other day this business of starting out in Kansas, and I'm referring to that at the end of 401, Fort Riley. It does seem to be a place where at least we start seeing documentation on this. But look, when the flu hits here initially, it's kind of, flu shmoo. We've all seen flu. Well, this hits and hits hard and kills. That becomes something else. And again, as it's been implied earlier in the week, did this transmute into something even more viral because of the conditions at the front? Well, hard to know. We might, if this happened today, we might be able to figure that out more closely than here. So again, hard to know. But 43,000 U.S. servicemen will die, especially in the latter months of 1918 from the flu. So that's big. And of course, again, just as it would us, this keeps us home, and people didn't get out, they didn't go to church, they didn't go to movies, and this is the time period, by the way, when 100 million Americans went to the movies every week. I don't go to movies 6 times a year. So this is a lot of folks staying home, just riding it out.
We had a difficult time even burying. I had 2 great aunts
Yeah,
that died. And
yeah,
only the family could take them out and bury them.
Yeah.
Nobody else.
yeah. Yeah, this is rough stuff. I said this is a conservative era we're moving into. One of the challenges, one perceived challenges here is radicalism, terrorism. Sound familiar? This is an era, look, with the Russian Revolution successful, the Bolsheviks coming in, and communism taking over in Russia, and with each passing year in the 20s, it gets even more crazy and violent, destructive, and killing your own, those kinds of things. And it translates into what becomes the communist USSR. We perceive that as a challenge here. One thing that's happening, it happened before the war, it's going to be happening, we believe was going to happen after the war, was immigration would be really kicking up here. Now, we had let in all kinds of folks, 1870s, 80s, 90s, up to the war itself. Tens of millions of people had come in from Europe, significant numbers from all over Europe, as opposed to earlier decades of American history where they tend to come from Western Europe, where a lot of your folks maybe came from, England, Wales, and France, and Netherlands, those kinds of places, England, those kinds of places, Ireland, etc. This is a lot of Central Europeans, Eastern Europeans, Southern Europeans. The perceived threat there was twofold, I think. One, people who looked and said, okay, well, wait a minute, maybe we have enough immigrants as it is. Maybe we let the door open wide enough, and maybe it's time to kind of shut it a bit. The other challenge, of course, is with the perceived presence of radicalism in Europe, especially with the Communist Revolution in Russia, we don't want to import that here. So, and look, this gets, I think, traction when you have radical groups that were here already. We'd had radical groups here back from the beginning with this, in terms of this era of immigration. And then when you throw in the early 1920s, late teens, early 1920s, radical groups that were sending bombs through the mail. Sound familiar? You see a number here at the top right on 402, 40 bombs intercepted by postal officials. And in some cases, not picked up by postal officials, and they actually were delivered, and then people got messed up. There's a senator here who lost his hands. We're going to call the governmental response to this here in just a bit. Palmer raids. Okay, well, who's that guy? That's Attorney General, or not Attorney General. Yeah, it's Attorney General. Palmer. Palmer will be targeted by radical groups. A bomb will be sent to his house to destroy part of his house. This is real to him. And he's going to interpret this as, now look, we can't just sit by and watch this happen. We've got to deal with it. This is one more question mark about how much liberty do we surrender to protect what liberty is left. Sound familiar? What's going to happen here is, on one level, government agencies are going to be created for domestic surveillance, to rout out spies, those kinds of things. Look, the Espionage Act itself had been designed for that, created in 1917 when we went into the war. But this is going to be more of a kick-up from that. What you'll see in the last full paragraph on 402 is, we're going to establish here in this time period, this 1919, the General Intelligence Division. Led by, see, J. Edgar Hoover, 24-year-old J. Edgar Hoover. J. Edgar Hoover had been in the government service during the war. He had functioned under the Espionage Act during the war. His mindset, I think, on one level already was, in emergency situations, you deal with the perceived threats, or the actual threats in this case, strongly. Rights might have to go by the wayside, maybe, those kinds of things. I think that's his mindset, and I think it stays his mindset here for a bit. And Palmer, I think, is going to be complicit in this at the same time. Now, look, we all, I hope you get, the GID eventually becomes the FBI. Still led by J. Edgar Hoover, all the way into what? 70s. It's going to be around forever. So what we're going to see here with bombs in the mail and these kinds of things, okay, we got to shut these radical groups down, whether they're legal or not. I mean, again, when does your right to assemble come to an end? Freedom of speech, whatever it is. And I won't answer that, and I'll let you mull it around. So we got what are called Palmer raids. These are just literally the government will break into party headquarters of some radical group or this radical group or whatever it was. There's all kinds of groups like this. And try to find evidence or material or guns or whatever it was. And a lot of them didn't pan out to really produce very much, but it did put a lot of pressure on these kinds of radical groups. And a lot of them go underground. Some of them go out of existence completely. Now, I'm always conflicted on these kinds of things. I'm not real crazy about a whole lot of really virulent leftist groups running around here, but I'm also not crazy about a whole lot of crazy right-wing groups either. But again, at what point does their right to protest and everything end with my rights and their rights? Where do they put up? So again, bombs in the mail, bombs in the mail. So we leave it at that. This will put, but look, this is what we call the Red Scare. We talk about the Red Scare of the 1950s. This is the Red Scare of the 1920s. This is dress rehearsal for what comes in the 1950s. So it is widespread. It is conservative era. One of the other impacts ultimately is going to be we are going to look at immigration and say, okay, enough's enough. So what you'll see here, by the way, is that Mayor? What we see here from 403, 404 is the shift here to where we had such wide open doors on immigrants, and then we're just going to watch those doors slowly close. Well, not slowly, in some cases, just very quickly close. Now, I mentioned here Sacco and Vanzetti because most of the texts do. And Sacco and Vanzetti, I think, are indicative of the political shift taking place in America in this time period, especially relative to immigration. Sacco and Vanzetti are a couple of Italian immigrants who get arrested and accused of carrying out a payroll robbery in Brainfield, Massachusetts. Okay, let's answer the question first. Did they do it or not? Well, I think they did. I think there's enough evidence to say these two guys did what they were accused of. So what? So what do we bother mentioning? We mention it because here are a couple of Italian immigrants accused of a crime at a time when people are virulently anti-immigrant. And to what extent does that attitude impact, say, the jury or even the judge in this case that will help result in confirm we're going to find these guys guilty? Well, again, it's hard to quantify, but it's probably an element. I mean, when you have, you see at the top left here, when you have the judge in the trial referring to them using the words that he does, I won't say them because you can read, that doesn't imply impartiality to me. So again, I think Sacco and Vanzetti case usually shows up in text just as kind of, these are kind of poster guys for anti-immigration and those kinds of things. Again, I think they're guilty, but it certainly may also be a tainted trial today. Leave it at that. All right. Let's look at this anti-immigration business. We see in 1921 the passage of the Emergency Immigration Act. Look at the details here. It limited European immigration to 3% of the number of foreign-born people of a specific nationality in the U.S. according to the 1910 census. In other words, if group 1, whatever it is, ethnic group A, if there were 2 million of them here in America according to the 1910 census, then we would allow in only 60,000 of those people into the country in a given year. That make sense? Okay, 60,000 may sound like a lot or not, but it's not compared to numbers we've seen previously. So it tries to keep a ratio according to what's already here, who's already here. But again, the whole point is you're funneling this down. You are creating a funnel so that not many folks are going to get through it. And then you'll see, by the way, 3 years later, in 1924, we reduced this down to 2%. And a lot of this is really going to be just, again, doors closing. Makes it, again, ironic for a lot of us, European descent. I think we always kind of say, well, it's always open to Europeans. You know. Our problem is, somebody else. Hispanics or that, anyway, you know what I mean. We reach a point here where only 150,000 immigrants are allowed in annually. So it's not a completely shut door, unless you're Asian, by the way. Asian, we shut the door completely. We begun to do that, by the way, back in the late 19th century. So that wasn't new. You'll also see at the end of that first paragraph on the right on 404, there is one group that we basically opened the door wider for. Hispanics. Been a while, hasn't it? That door is wide open. So unlike today, where I think we look at Hispanic immigration, of course, we filter that in terms of illegal aliens, I think. But I think, unfortunately, kind of all Hispanics have to get lumped in the same group eventually. And that's unfortunate. But here, this isn't the group. We're keeping out Europeans and open door for Hispanics.
What did large numbers of illegal immigrants first start coming to the United States?
Well, when you say illegal immigrant, is that code for Hispanics?
Well, yeah.
I would say in terms of illegal immigration, because we keep the door open, and we keep the door open on Hispanics all the way through World War II. That clever program, World War II, the Cicero program, where we are begging the Mexican government to send us as many Hispanic workers as possible, especially in the Southwest and California, especially where they need to pick fruit and those kinds of things. We just didn't have workers for it. In more recent years, we started seeing these kinds of numbers of hundreds of thousands, millions of people. We've never seen that kind of number. Unless you look at Europeans who came in, in the 1600s and 1700s as illegal immigration. I mean, from an Indian perspective, they didn't need us here. So, but I get your question. I think most of we're talking about the past, post-World War II era. Does that make sense, please?
Yeah.
Next question. So this is not, the Emma Lazarus poem. Give me your poor, you're wretched, you're tired. It's kind of, hang on. I think we got enough of you guys already. One of the more clear parts of this shift to conservatism in this time period is the resurgence of the Ku Klux Klan. Now, when I say resurgence of the Klan, that may be a surprise to some of you because your view may have been, well, hang on. The Klan came in after the Civil War. I thought we always had one. But the Klan had always been around. Well, yes and no. What happened was the Klan, yes, the initial Klan comes in after the Civil War. It's formed, first purpose, by the way, for the Ku Klux Klan was not what it became pretty quickly. Initially, it was actually a fraternal organization for Confederate officers, a group that they could just kind of get together and, reminisce about the war. Well, it didn't take long for that kind of transmogrified into something about, in the context of Reconstruction, about, okay, we need to stop Reconstruction and we need to get all these white Northerners out of here who are helping blacks, and we need to keep blacks in a position of subservience and those kinds of things. So, but look, that initial Klan back in the late 60s into the early 70s, 1870s, the government came down on it like a hammer. Ulysses S. Grant, as president, hated the Klan. He said, this is a lot of nonsense and we're going to put this out of business. And so a lot of government pressure on the Klan back in the 1870s, and they virtually drove the Klan out. Now, there's always going to be probably somebody who keeps the sheets in the drawer, but it's not going to be what it was there for that moment in time. I mean, that Night Rider, terrorist, sheet stuff, and hoods, and all that kind of nonsense, and crosses burning. A lot of that faded away when you go into the 1880s, 1990s. I think largely because with Jim Crow, what do you need a Klan for? The law is keeping blacks in place. The law is determining what blacks can do and not do. The law says segregation, so Klan's kind of superfluous. Now, what's going to happen here is, in 1915, we get a second reestablishment of the Klan. Very specifically, down in Georgia, guys meeting out at Stone Mountain, this kind of stuff. And basically, they're reviving the Klan in 1915. Yeah.
Believe it or not, there was actually a chapter of it right here in York County.
Yeah, there's a chapter of the Klan in the 20s here in York County. Probably wasn't a black person in town, but they were Catholics, so that's... Because look, this Klan recreated in 1915 is more than just being about anti-black. This Klan is, it's in your daddy's Klan. This is a different Klan. This Klan, yes, this Klan still doesn't like black people. That's the single thread in every era of the Klan. They always trying to hold black people back. This Klan is a much bigger tent. This Klan is anti-black. It's anti-immigrant. It's anti-Catholic. It's anti-Jew. Yeah, this is a much larger tent. And this Klan, too, a couple things. This Klan still wears the robes. Still does that. It's like you see over on page 405. But look at the difference here. The two things indicative in this photograph you see on 405. This says this is a different Klan. If the earlier Klan was a night rider, undercover darkness, hood so you can't tell who anybody is, a terrorist organization, this group has a public appearance that says, we're legit, we don't care if you know who we are. What you don't see here in this photograph are guys with hoods that cover their faces. They still got the dunce cap. Yeah, isn't it? But anyway, yes, sir.
Quick note, yesterday, surprised me greatly, Father Flanagan had the traveling troop in the big wagons. He stopped that activity when a Klan in a town in western Nebraska threatened the group because they had black kids in it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and Catholic to boot. Yeah.
Yeah, Catholics, and he completely shut the thing down.
Yeah. Yeah. This is another Klan. Again, now look, there's still going to be night rider stuff, sort of. There's still going to be, night demonstrations, and of course this is an era of lynching anyway when it comes to blacks. It's a wholesale practice in terms of lynching blacks. But this is a Klan that says, we don't care if you know who we are, we're going public, we're going legit, this is the real deal, why not be a part of this? Look, if you got fears about these kinds of folks, then join the Klan. And a lot of people did.
It also went north.
Oh, you bet it went north, yeah. This is, membership of the Klan here is hard to estimate because they didn't really publish this kind of stuff. They would say we are millions of people, and they're right, they were. 3 to 8, the common number you see in the text is 4. But at a time when America's maybe 120 million people, less than half what we have today, you got 4 million people that are registered members of the Klan, including 11 state governors. Imagine today being a politician in America and being a member of the Klan. How far down the road do you think you're going to get?
That's more than we're communists in Russia.
Well, maybe. I'd say 50 to 75 members of Congress, members of the Klan. And again, as we've already said, they're not all Southern. You know where the real hotbed of the Klan was here in the 1920s? State that had more Klan members than anywhere else? Indiana. Indiana? Slow decade in Indiana. Even Oklahoma, by the way. Oklahoma had a fair number of members of the Klan. I want to say they had a governor there for a while. I won't. Did we? Am I right? I think. But anyway. Or maybe a guy who ran for governor wanted too. But look, this is a Klan that's accepted. This is a Klan that people don't tend to question. Again, today, look, we vilify politicians today because 40 years earlier in their lives, they were members of the Klan then. Much less now. So this is a whole other kind of thing. Where does that come from? Again, I think this comes from the conservative era. A way to organize, a way to become fraternally connected, those kinds of things, memberships and all that. But again, this isn't just the night rider kind of stuff. This is a Klan that has a uniform and pays its dues. So, fortunately, this Klan doesn't last a long time, and then we kind of have the Klan kind of go not out of existence, but largely dormant. And then when did we see a resurgence in the Klan again? The 60s. Some of the 50s, but more in the 60s. Why? Because of civil rights, because the segregation stuff's being kicked in the head, those kinds of things. And they proceed again, okay, we're losing ground. Look, these people are largely WASPs, white, Anglo-Saxon Protestants. So when we say anti-Catholic, it's not about race, obviously, it's about religion. This is where these folks are concerned that there are too many Catholics. And part of that is too many immigrants who've come in who are Catholic. So these things meld together. So that's a snapshot of us. Look that stat here in the end of that paragraph. This march you're seeing here in this photograph is actually 1925, by the way, and 40,000 Klansmen and women, I believe women are in this, women members, are going to be marching down the streets of Washington, D.C., calling for legislation. Again, some of this is about terrorist stuff, and some of this is about going legit and working through the political system as it exists at the time. That's another thing. Yeah.
I remember in the 1950s, community organizers paralleled the Ku Klux Klan in their movement for freedom of black people.
Oh,
And
okay.
community organizers are well and alive today, and there are millions of them
Yeah,
everywhere
yeah.
in the U.S.
Yeah, yeah.
And they're
Like Obama. Obama did back in the day.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so my father just said, she's a community organizer. She was a black lady in our community.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, what is that? And he said, well, they go around stirring up trouble. He said, don't have anything to do
Yeah,
with it.
yeah, long be us, not them. The next page and a half here or so is addressing something again that's hard to nail down. There's a perceived moral shift taking place in the 1920s in America. What's that about? Where does it come from? Again, it's hard to get. I'm not a sociologist. I think part of what's happening here is the war is going to change us. I think our concept of morality, at least for some folks, is going to be shifting. When you go to theater and you see that much death and destruction, you come out and question why it even happened, and the value of life, and where was God, and these kinds of questions. I think you're leaving yourself open to view the world differently. Certainly what's happening here is a perceived moral shift in terms of morals going down. Okay, to what extent, how much? Again, that's where it gets kind of dicey. I think overall, probably for the average person, life probably didn't shift that much morally for the average person. You know, I mean, most folks are still church-going, moral kinds of people. But look, we talk about the Klan and church. The Klan put Klan and church together. I mean, this was their religion in some respects, but this is about Protestantism that says, racism is okay, and Jesus saves us, saves us. I guess that's what I probably should say. Jesus saves us, and only us. But anyway, I just don't begin to get this photograph. I just don't begin to understand who these people are and how you think that way. And let's make sure that we don't. Let's make sure we don't have our prejudices. Because we probably all do. You need to be cognizant of that. Just because you're not a member of the Klan doesn't mean we're out of it.
You may want to read that pay organizer card. You can see it.
Oh, here? Yeah, when you read all what it says here, the Negroes beware, do not attend communist meetings. Paid organizers for the communists are only trying to get Negroes in trouble. Alabama is a good place for good Negroes who live in, but it is a bad place for Negroes who believe in social equality. So don't be fooled by those communists who say that you should have the rights equal to us. The Klan is watching you, so I don't know how you even do that without laughing while you're doing it. I just don't.
That picture on the right, is
Yeah.
that no, over on the
On
right,
the-
is that a black congregation? That they're-
No, that is not a black congregation. Everybody there is as white as the driven snow. White man. I don't see a woman in there. There may be, but I don't see a woman.
There's a woman on the front row.
Yeah. Probably keeping a low profile, though, I'm going to guess. Okay, let's come back to this page here. Again, I think most people probably their morals didn't shift that much. Moral shifts tend to take place over a long period of time, and they tend to have the vanguard leading the way and all of that. I think what gives us the image more directly of this moral shift, and this especially with women, and maybe that's part of how we look at it. If women are changing their normal behavior, then let's translate that into there's a moral shift that runs in tandem with it. Does that make sense? And maybe to a point there was. What we have here is the women's liberation movement, 1920 version. Well, what's that about? And how many people is it? Well, again, I think most folks, most women in the 1920s did not look like this woman on page 405. I usually ask my guys in U.S. survey when they get to do, because they use the same material, by the way, that you do. This what you see is just it's page for page what I use in U.S. survey. Only their notebook is 400 pages long, not 50. But they get college credit, you don't. But they pay a lot of money and you didn't. So. It all works out. And I usually will ask the guys, she good looking? She attractive to you? And they never know how to answer that question. You know, so. Then I have somebody ask me and I'm kind of, how would I know? I wasn't there. But look, this is, I think, what we perceive as the new image of women in the 1920s. And again, it's probably a tip of the iceberg action. You see it, and one reason why it kind of makes our mental image is it's in the magazines, it's in the flashy magazines. I mean, think about women's magazines today and how women look in women's magazines today. And do those women look like the average person you know? No, they don't. We call them models for a reason. So this is where we get, yeah, there are women who begin to dress, look, and this is a real shift. When you have this gal wearing the kind of makeup she's wearing, this is still an era where most women didn't wear makeup at all. I mean, I'm calling her the smoky-eyed flapper for a reason. Look at the lipstick. It's not just about wearing lipstick. Look where her lips actually are compared to where the lipstick actually is. Yeah, this is like the joke, like Batman's Joker. You know, it sounds not quite right. So she's trying to portray an image, you know, this smoky-eyed, seductive kind of image. And again, you don't have women walking the streets in America in the 1920s all dressed like this, looking like this, and all with the, you know, come thither kind of look. But look, the clothes are different here. The fact that she has bare arms at all. We might look at this photograph and kind of, yeah, an arm. To bare your arms here in the 1920s, to bare arms, men are bearing arms, the women are bearing their arms. To here, bare arms would really be scandalous.
Yes.
We don't give it a thought. To bring your skirt up to here. We've all been there. I'll bet some of you ladies did it. And may even now. Anybody want to confess now? Confession's good. So it's about exposing an ankle, exposing an arm. And again, from our perspective, we may look at that and say, what's the big deal? Well, I'm going to editorialize here for just a second. I feel like I'm on eggshells with this topic, by the way. It's, you know, to a couple. But look, in the 1920s, I'm trying to think how to say this. In the 1920s, if an ankle excited you, then it excited you. It may not be about the morality or the immorality of exposing your ankles. It's what it does to the guy who really likes ankles. Does that make sense? Again, I'm probably not saying this well. I'm trying to walk through. But this is women who are dressing like there's some dressing like this. Ankles. It's not just the arms, the ankles. It's the flimsy, clingy kind of costume here, and then the short hair, which again we don't give a lot of thought to that. Short hair here really would indicate to a lot of people an immoral woman. How many of you had mamas who didn't cut their hair? Or how many of you women are reticent to cut your hair? I don't see a lot of short hair. Looks like a lot of you gave up on this long time ago. Yeah, we just don't think about it. But short hair here was, that's not right. To some people, that'd even be, you know, a biblical kind of thing.
How they got their name?
Flapper? Well, there's different versions of this. One is that one part of this fashion too, especially the college women, was that they wore galoshes. I've never understood that. And they wouldn't buckle them so they would flap. You know, I don't know if that's the female equivalent of an African-American young man who lets his pants kind of droop. I don't know. We'll leave it at that, by the way. But, you know, just a way to protest social norms. Again, these things are kind of hard for me to understand. Beyond this, though, it's not just how you look, it's the activities that you're involved in. This is where we start using these terms petting and necking, and that's probably all I'm going to say about that, because if you don't know what those are, you've gotten this far without knowing that. And if you do know what those are, then it may conjure up memories you don't want to remember. We're just going to leave that at that. Don't ask me the difference. The difference, obviously, is the neck. All right. Now, have we beat this enough? Have we done enough of this? I feel like I have done enough of this.
We're not going to talk about that, but what I wonder is, what was the time frame where media really took off? You know, what,
Here.
I mean,
Here.
and of course, media has such a
Yeah,
big influence
sure,
then,
sure.
obviously.
Yeah, she's talking about how the media, the impact of media. I mean, sound familiar?
Yes.
This is 100 years ago. The media is playing a really significant role. We have national media now. This is national print media, it's magazines, it's journals, it's radio we're going to talk about here in just a bit. This movies, sure. If you've got 100 million people going to the movies every week, and those movies aren't having an impact on you in terms of morality, sure they are. And by the way, in the 1920s, censorship in movies was very, very, very limited. You don't get the Hays, I think it's in here somewhere, the Hays, I forget what's called, Hays Council, Hays something, but this is the group, Catholic Led, that censored movies, movie content. So you actually had some things in movies that in terms of language or even how much female body was shown earlier in the teens, coming in the 20s, compared to what would come later, be more conservative later. So anyway, all right. Anybody have any stories about any of this, the flappers, blah, blah, blah? Anybody have any mothers that were flappers or whatever? I think I have a photograph of my grandmother who was very conservative, but she went to college in the 1920s, and I think I have a photograph of her wearing galoshes. I don't remember whether hers was flapped or not, but she didn't have this kind of dress on, I can guarantee you that. By the way, how many of you had parents or grandparents who were in college by in the 1920s? Yeah, it's becoming more normal. It's not the norm. That's not going to happen until post-World War II, coming into the 70s. But here we're seeing more folks going to college than in the past. So. And again, that college scene here is, the guys with the raccoon coats and the straw hats and the flapper stuff, and alcohol, and what's new. It's just it's what it is. Let's talk about Prohibition. Prohibition may be kind of moot for most of us. Whether there is one or not, probably doesn't change our view for most of us of alcohol, but we'll live with that. What we have here is the culmination of a movement that had been around for decades, and you can take the anti-alcohol movement in American history, serious movements all the way back to pre-Civil War, the 1840s. In fact, you have some states that went dry in the 1840s, and they were still dry coming into national prohibition. So what difference? They Maine for one. In fact, a lot of early prohibition laws were based on what are called Maine laws, because Maine was a state that did that very early on. What's happening here again is a perception that there's an immorality with alcohol consumption, not just by drinking itself, but yes, to the point of excess, but I'll get that. We can always parse the difference in taking, a drink every now and then and being an alcoholic. Again, I'm not going to debate that issue. Your role, that's where it is. But what's happening here is the perception increasingly that this is a moral issue. It's becoming a national issue. You have a national campaign. We'd just be better off without alcohol. All of the sins of alcohol can be projected in these various groups, temperance groups around America. And then the war itself, even that argument I mentioned the other day where grain is being used to produce alcohol, so it means there's not bread going to some poor kid in Belgium, so let's cut out alcohol consumption, that way we feed more Europeans. Okay. Point being, that by the time you reach December 1917, Congress will pass the 18th Amendment, it goes into law by 1919 under the Volstead Act, and this will ban the manufacture, sale, and transportation of all alcoholic products, unless they're in medicine form. There'll be a whole lot more medicine form alcohol consumed than previously. Now look, this is going to be a social experiment that goes on from 1919 to 1933. Whatever, you want it back? Prohibition, you want it back? Gangsters? Yeah. I'm going to editorialize for 1 minute. So nothing I'm going to say for the next minute is officially came out of my mouth.
We have to swear.
What? Let me put out my other persona. Look, Prohibition didn't work. Prohibition did not work. America has always been an alcohol-consuming place from colonial era on. We decided very early in our history, because Europeans had decided prior to Americans, that alcohol was going to be the drink of choice. Or let's say the drug of choice. In the 1830s, when we see a temperance movement coming out of woodwork in that time period, aligning itself with the second Great Awakening, alcohol consumption was rampant. In the 1830s going into the 40s, the average American consumed 7 gallons of alcohol per year. Per capita. Today, alcohol consumption in America is about half that per capita. And that's a lot of us not getting our share. We don't consume as much alcohol as we used to, if that means anything to you. The temperance movement in the 1840s will actually be effective enough to where it will reduce the per capita consumption of alcohol down to about what it is today, down to about 3.5 gallons. But we've always been an alcohol-consuming people. That's our drug of choice. A prohibition didn't change that much. Again, it's hard to quantify the numbers on this. Some historians would say there's more alcohol consumption during Prohibition than there was before Prohibition. And of course, a lot of all of this is going to be illegal. And we've already said gangsterism. I mean, look, one reason why gangsterism comes into vogue in the 1920s, how it comes out of woodworking, I mean, just comes gangbusters, no pun intended. Well, the pun wasn't intended. Is because of alcohol. There's other stuff that Al Capone got money from. But when you have something that people desire, when you have human desire for X, Y, or Z, there's always going to be somebody who will do whatever they have to do to make sure you get it. It happens today, doesn't it? We have illegal drugs today. There's always somebody who's willing to run the risks to make a fast buck to put drugs into your hands, or your kids or your grandkids' hands. That's the way it always is. Now, we're at a point, because look, let me say one more thing, because if I'm standing here saying Prohibition didn't work, therefore we shouldn't bother to try it, then what about marijuana today? I'll give you my perspective. This is just Tim McNeese speaking. If we're going to have a drug of choice in America, it's going to be alcohol. What we're on the cusp of right now is, are we going to have 2 drugs of choice in America? I don't think 2 drugs of choice in America makes us a better America. That's just me editorializing. You can think about that however you think about that, and everybody does. But I think it's unfortunate. I think marijuana is getting a lot of traction these days. And we'll see. I think some of these states that are trying it, like Colorado, which really complicates stuff for us in Nebraska. My son is a state trooper, and these guys out on the roads on Highway 80. This is obviously a drug corridor anyway. And then when you got the stop here in western Nebraska, some college kid from Boulder, you find marijuana in the car. I bought that legally. You can't have it in Nebraska. So anyway, I think I better tell last time. What happens here is, again, it didn't work. There's a lot about it. The government went after it. They went after it like crazy. It just doesn't work. And of course, the gangsterism that comes out of the woodwork here is going to be big. The illegal hooch that's made sometimes is deadly. I mean, guys are making bathtub gin and things like that, or just people who are making it to sell, they're making it in ways that include everything under the sun. I remember reading something somewhere sometime about, I don't remember what it was, officials, but anyway, somebody had some illegally, or some confiscated illegal alcohol. They thought, well, let's get this chemically tested. Just see what they're putting in this stuff. You know, I mean, some of this is coming, obviously, with Al Capone in Chicago. He's bringing stuff across the Canadian border. I mean, it's too easy to bring alcohol into America. We've got too broad borders. But anyway, they sent this stuff off to be tested. A chemist report came back, and he said, well, there's this in it, there's this in it, there's this in it, there's this in it. Oh, and by the way, your horse is pregnant. And has diabetes. That's what that is. You want a smooth taste to your alcohol. I guess horse urine does that. Good. This is going to be changed by the early 1930s once FDR comes in. You want to know what one of the main reasons was for getting rid of Prohibition in 1933? Taxes. Taxes. It's not just a social experiment that ran its course. We want the money, the government wants the money from the taxes. Same with marijuana today, you bet. Marijuana is being, everybody gets that, don't they? Marijuana is being legalized in part because states want the tax revenue. And I think that's a crummy reason. All right, we'll stop with that and give you a break here until about 10 after, and then we will wrap it all up.